All right. Well, thank you everybody for taking a moment to jump on this CallRail training. This is for Ivy Bound tutors, and today is January 14th, 2021. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So we're hosting a CallRail training for the purpose of just providing some level understanding of the base system. And we'll reserve a few minutes at the end for a questions and answer session. So what is CallRail? Well, I understand that the Ivy Bound system needs some investment. So CallRail actually behaves as a call or phone system. So I think CallRail may end up replacing what you currently have in place today. And I think you'll actually find it easier to use because it's not a hardware system, it's a software system in the cloud. So it's easily configurable and we're able to route calls the way we want it. Now, we do understand that there are a couple different teams here. So we've got some accounting, we've got office management, we've got sales. So each team member is going to use the system slightly different, and that's okay. But so CallRail also allows us to capture all voicemails onto the platform. So what this does is, what that means is, it used to be that if somebody called somebody, that voicemail was stuck on either their cell phone or their office phone. Nobody else could hear it. This allows us to have a team approach to managing all telecommunications. So if an inbound lead comes in, they leave a voicemail, everybody can hear it so that we can make sure it gets triaged and nothing falls through the cracks. The same things for text messages. The fourth bullet point about protecting your personal information. So I know that when we met a year ago and we talked about working remotely, there was a lot of concern about people using their own personal cell phones for making business calls. Well, that addresses that concern because you can send and receive calls directly through CallRail, the whole time protecting your personal information so that nobody sees your cell phone number. So we're calling out from the system. Additionally, it allows us to establish what are called call flows. So basically, you may have heard this term called phone trees or an automated system. So when somebody calls into Ivy Bound, we're able to set up these call flows that say, okay, somebody's going to hear a greeting and then be able to pick from a phone list and say, press 1 if you're a customer, press 2 if you're a client, press 3 for billing. So we can set all those up in CallRail, which makes it really nice. And what this essentially gives us from an organizational standpoint is a single platform to manage all telecommunications. So it's calling, texting, voicemails, all in one system. So how are you going to use CallRail? Well, you're going to probably receive phone calls. You're probably going to make outbound calls. You can use it to document your conversations. You can check voicemails. And I really recommend that each and every day that you start and throughout the day that you're checking the voicemails. You can use it to send text messages. And at the premium level, we can even transfer phone calls between people that are online using the system. You do have a dashboard. So you'll log into callrail.com. You've got a username and password. You log into the dashboard. This is your center for managing all your communications. So you can see all the calls that have come in. You can see all the return calls as long as calls are being made in the system. You can see voicemail messages, text messages. There's also an app for you to download. And the app has most of the same functionality as the dashboard, obviously somewhat limited, but because it is an app, you have a much broader set of features in the dashboard. So if you're going to the dashboard by going to callrail.com in your Chrome browser or Firefox, it's got a lot of functionality. But even at the device level, you download this app, now phone calls are coming to your handheld device through the app. You're not answering it on your normal phone app. This is the CallRail app that you'll be using to send and receive phone calls. There is a call log. So at the top, you can see that there is a activity, reports, tracking, and setting menu. But in the call log under the activity page, you're able to filter through different results. So you can see who called today. You can see what calls were outbound, which ones were inbound, what calls were missed. And you can edit the columns. You can export the reports. So at the top, you've got this nice graph. At the very top, you've got a main menu, again, looking at the activity, reports, tracking, setting, and then you got a left menu down the side. Okay. So you've got a graph of how many calls, and it may be too small for you to see, but this is a filter that shows all the calls that came in last month by the days of the month, the call direction. So these are all inbound calls, and this is where the answer status is missed. So there's a lot of ways for us to slice and dice the data so that from a management perspective, Mark is able to see the volume and the quality of the calls. Additionally, you as the end user, you can actually sort the list by what phone number is coming in or who the recipient is. So it's really useful. There's also some really good identifiable icons. So Isabel went to the trouble of clipping all these out. So you may see these icons at the end of each row on the call log. And there's an easy explanation. All you have to do is hover over the icon and it tells you what it means. So this icon means it's an outbound call, answered call. We've got a missed call, an abandoned call, and a voicemail. So quickly, you should be able to tell what kind of call this was in the call log. So you can identify, does it require action? So obviously, if it's an abandoned call or an unanswered call or a voicemail, it probably requires some sort of action to be taken. There are actually two sections to CallRail. So when you log in, you're going to see this icon with the little squiggle, looks like an analytics. That shows the activity page. So it's what this looks like here. When you click on this icon down here, this is actually the lead center. Lead center is where you're going to do a lot of stuff. So this is where it's going to show a register of all the recent calls. If there's a voicemail, you'll be able to hit the little play button and listen to the voicemail. It tells you the duration, the source. And if you need to call that person back, all you do is click on the dialer and you'll be able to make a phone call directly from your computer or from the handset using this feature. If you want to check voicemails, you'll just use this left menu. There's an option on the front page of the CallRail. If everybody could just go on mute, that'd be great, just so we can cut out some of the background noise. So there is a voicemail feature that shows a list of all the voicemails and then the log of all the voicemails. So when you click into the voicemails, obviously you're going to see the icon, you'll be able to listen. Here's something that we look at a lot is how much the agent spoke, which is you, and how much the customer spoke. So obviously a longer voicemail would have a larger discrepancy between the two numbers, but these recordings show the same for recorded phone calls. So that's actually a pretty good metric that we look at. How to send a text message. So inside Lead Center, you can click on this icon to compose a text. You can put in the recipient's phone number, or oftentimes by just clicking on the file over here, it'll pull in the recipient number, and then you can use the caller ID number that you want rather than using your own phone number. Will populate here, and then you can place the call or send a text. So how to use the timeline. So if you're in CallRail and you're in the activity section, you'll see an activity. So an event happened. This could be a call that you want to look at. So there is something called a timeline. So here you're able to, if you see this solid blue arrow, that means that there's a voicemail or an audio file that you can listen to. This next icon, you can immediately jump into the notes section to be able to record a note, or you can click on this arrow that you can see that's circled, and it jumps into something called a timeline. Now the timeline gives us a ton of information. So you can see the different touch points, you can see the initial source, you can see details about the caller that was able to be pulled in through caller ID. So if this, Seema, this is your account. So if Amy's caller ID has her first name, last name, and it's accurate, you can leave it. If sometimes we see Amy and maybe you see the first 5 digits, but it's a longer name, you can click on the pencil and you can update the name so it actually reflects your client. It gives you the city and the state, but oftentimes this is misleading. So it may be where they got their phone, but it doesn't mean that's where they live today. Because, like, and for example, my wife, who lives in West Hartford, she has a North Jersey phone number. She's had it for 15 years, and she'll never change it. So it doesn't mean that that's where they're from. It just means that's the what the voicemail says. It says. So also on the timeline, you're able to enter notes about the call. And that's really important when you're managing and working your way through voicemails. Like if you see a voicemail that's not been addressed and you call that person back, please put it in a note so that we know that you took care of it. If you know that it's a prospect and they're looking for a specific item, there's a tag section where you can click on the plus sign to add some tags that are already in the system, or you can add tags where you think it makes sense. If you know that they're a customer or they're looking at a certain package, you can actually throw in a value for that. And one of the things that Mark's really wants us to use is this qualified. So there's a thumbs up and a not thumbs up. So if it's a bummer of a call and it's Mike looking for dog walking, give it a non-qualified lead. If it's somebody that's qualified, give them a thumbs up. It does show up on the call log on the front page so that we can quickly sort through these things. Additionally, on the timeline, what you're going to see is an initial source. So I think years ago we used to track, okay, how many phone calls came in through the website. Now we think that because it came in through the website that's how it originated. But here's a good example. So Arthur Willie, which is probably Willis, we probably need to update that name, actually saw us through organic and probably searched for us organically on Google. They went to our website and that's the number that they called in on. So we're actually able to say, okay, this actually came from Google. And in the timeline, you're actually able to see the different landing pages that they landed on, what web sessions they have. So a lot of these timelines can be either really short because they took action right away, or they can be really long because they went to a lot of different pages on our website. And this will normally track them for about 30 days. So over time, you can see all their activity. So I often recommend that if you're going to be making a phone call out, check this timeline, check out the different pages, because you can see that this person was checking out our speedy reading page. That's a really good icebreaker, right? Hey, any interest in our speedy reading product? Absolutely. We also have the ability at the premium level, we'll have to check your subscription, but be able to transfer calls. So when you're signed in and you're working throughout the day, you want to have CallRail open and you want to show yourself as online, because if one person grabs a call and it's meant for another person, rather than hanging up and telling them to call you, you can actually just transfer the call within CallRail. So there is a button when you're on an active call to be able to select it and then select the person that you want to transfer it to. In CallRail, Mark is spending a lot of time looking at the missed calls. So if you can imagine, if we're spending a lot of money on advertising to drive traffic, right now we're getting each phone call and every form fill. If we add up all those missed calls, all the answered calls, each interaction costs Mark about $7.94. So it's really important that we're able to capture all the leads that are coming in. So we're able to tell, okay, what are the missed calls? What times of the day are we missing them? Do we need additional coverage? So there's actually a missed call feature on the reporting page, and you can go into the system and see for yourself. Now the sales team, best practices. So we want to accept all the calls through CallRail. As an agent, you can either accept those calls on the dashboard or through the app. We also want you to record all your activity, and then we also want you to make the outbound calls to the prospects in CallRail. Mark's philosophy is that if it's not in CallRail, it didn't happen. So let's make sure that he has the ability to be able to track. One of the things that we want to make sure that's happening, and by you calling people back, is that we're going in and we're actually responding to these missed calls and these abandoned calls, but we're doing it in CallRail. One of the tasks that Isabel is doing is she's matching up those missed calls and abandoned calls to outbound calls. That's a really good or important metric to mark right now. Also, every one of those calls needs to be recorded in the Ivy Bound marketing and sales spreadsheet. Um, and he also has a request that we're using text messages to reinforce callbacks and when you get voicemail. So use that text messaging feature to either elicit some sort of interest, confirm call dates and times, or overall just use it as another tool in your arsenal. And then Mark wants to make sure that we convey that don't rely on the name on the caller ID to gather lead information. So if the lead information that comes through says Amy Smith, it may not be Amy, it might be Doug. So it can't always be right, nor is the location always accurate. So, obviously we want you to document your activity in CallRail because that is our system of record, but you're also, I believe, documenting your activity in the CM as well. So soon we're working on, and actually we're currently working on updating the CM to add a lot of these fields so that you're not having to enter this information twice. And I promise you that entering the information twice is just only going to be a requirement for a short period of time until we finish working on this project. So let's see. Any questions up till now?
Yeah, I have one. This is Tasha.
Hey, Tasha.
Hi. So even though it tracks the missed calls and from the status of your graph that you just showed, it doesn't show how many calls, even though they were missed initially, because maybe you were on a call or something like that. It doesn't show that you've called them right back. So it kind of looks poorer than it actually is. Do you have a status on the calls that were called back from the missed calls?
Well, that's why we're manually going in and looking for that return call.
So it's a manual process that you have to go through. There's no graph for that one, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So right now, Isabel's been tasked with matching up missed calls with subsequent outbound calls the same day, the next day. I
Right.
don't know how far she's going.
Okay.
But you can use this missed call tool to absolutely see when those missed calls are. And if
Yeah, the timings.
yeah, and I think that if at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, if we're getting a ton of calls and we're missing a ton of calls, maybe what we need more backup.
Okay.
So it's not really a tool meant to admonish you. It's probably more of a staffing model tool as well.
Okay.
But we have to understand what's happening, right? So we're getting a ton of calls at noon and you're at lunch, which you got to eat, but do we have the right amount of staffing?
Okay.
And we don't know that right now until we start digging into the data.
Right.
But I can tell you that we should probably have this number way lower.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I just do billing. So how would this work for me?
So do you take any inbound calls?
Rarely, if someone has a billing question, maybe one every 2 months.
Okay.
Most
So-
people email me.
So there may be, so if you're doing everything through email, probably not. But if you're at any point in the future going to be taking inbound calls for billing issues, like if we put some sort of message in there that says press 3 for billing, those calls might be routed to you through CallRail. And at this point, this may be an informational session only because I'm not seeing any directives from Mark about adding you to CallRail. This might
Okay.
just be more for your information. Now, obviously, if you need to make any outbound calls, you want to be using the lead center to make that outbound call so you're not having to call from your home or your own personal cell phone.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay. All right, any other questions? All right, so this is CallRail. This is the marketing spreadsheet. Tasha, I'll pick on you for a moment. So we do need every call that you field, that you work on, to be documented in here. You also have the ability to go directly to the CallRail, and you can go to Google and just Google CallRail support, and they have tons of articles. They've got a really good support team. You can actually pick up the phone and call support if there's something that you don't understand. There's a lot of documents. So there's a lot of self-service options here. Plus, if you go to YouTube, you can watch a ton of videos on how to, what is CallRail, how to use a certain feature. So there's a lot of tools at your disposal. But right now, from a level set perspective, we wanted just to share the CallRail system. Now, I know that Natasha and Seema and Sandy probably use CallRail every day and could probably be teaching this session. But Mark felt it was important that we went over certain topics to make sure that everybody is using CallRail the same exact way. And I think probably the next step is for Mark to provide some guidance as to what the next level of usage on CallRail is, right, Joan? So whether or not you'll be using it for fielding billing conversations.
Okay, all right.
Obviously, there's going to be an impact to the business if they're going to get rid of their main phone system and we rely on CallRail exclusively. So we're prepared to help with that transition should it come. Right now, we just understand that there's some issues with the current phone system.